Hello friends, welcome to my channel Clinical Biochemistry by Dr. P. K. Prabhakar. Today we are going to talk about calcium. In minerals, this is the first element, first mineral which we are going to talk about. So we will talk about basic introduction about the calcium. Then we will talk about the sources of calcium, its RDA, functions, regulations, and some of the abnormality like hypocalcemia, tetany, hypercalcemia, and some other osteoporosis and a number of other disorders. So first, if we'll see the basic, this is calcium. So the atomic number of calcium is 20. Symbol normally we are writing in Ca, and it is an alkaline earth metal. If you can see normally its most important oxidation state is +2. So in our case also, it is normally present in the +2 forms. Uh, Calcium is one of the most abundant metallic element in the human body, and if you see in the earth crust, this is the fifth most abundant element in the earth crust. In the human, if you see, not only human, living organism, most of the living organism they have calcium. So living organism concentrate calcium in their normally in the skeletals, bones, cells, and in higher organism, calcium is most abundant organic element. If we'll, calcium is where we require it. So calcium is essential for both plants, animals, all the living systems, and is broadly employed as a signal transduction molecules, enzyme cofactors, elements. We will see later on the detailed functions. The total content in an adult human being is roughly 2% of their body weight, which makes roughly 1 to 1.5 kg. And out of this 1.1 to 1.5 kg calcium, 99% or more than 99% is present in bones and teeth. uh, Remaining whatever left out, that is less than 1% of the calcium, they are present in the extracellular matrix. You can call it in the circulation or some other places, so outside their skeletal tissue, and there it is going to perform number of important functions in our body. The important source normally whatever we are going to eat, there we are having milk product, fish, green vegetables, almonds. All these are leafy vegetables are the chief sources. Bone disease, that is rickets, occurs when a lack of vitamin D impairs calcium absorption. Later on, now we will see vitamin D is very significantly associated with the calcium or parathyroid hormones. So, bone disease, which is rickets, occurs when lack of vitamin D impairs the calcium absorption from the GIT tract into the extracellular fluids, and there it causes. If we'll say some of the important function in summary, it involves in neurotransmitter missions, neurotransmitter, or you can call it neurotransmitters release and their functions. It is blood clotting factor 4, so it is one of the important blood clotting components. And not only it works as a factor 4, it also activates number of other factors also. It involves in cell proliferation, cell growth, cell division, cell signaling. Its role in bone mineralizations in the form of hydroxyapatite when it is going to combine with phosphate. So calcium along with phosphate forms hydroxyapatite, and there it involves in bone mineralization process. It has a role in cardiac functions, muscle contractions when it is associated with the troponin C. It also have a role in the digestive system functions, secretory process, because many of the enzymes, many of the hormones are going to be released because of calcium. And calcium also regulates the membrane permeability, plasma membrane permeability, cellular permeability. So these are the summary of the functions. Later on we will see important functions in the details. These are the major sources of calcium where calcium present: milk, fenugreek, broccoli, rice, fortified breakfast cereals, amarnath, drumstick leaves, sesame seeds, kale, fortified juice, vegetables, almonds, collard, tofu, bok choy. These are the important major sources. Uh, and roughly we are eating every day. If someone person is not going to eat it, they will have a deficiency of calcium. What is the recommended dietary allowance according to age? Because its involvement will be in the bone formation, bone mineralizations, bone density formation. So That's why during the growing phases, its requirement will be slightly higher, and in the adults, normally its requirement is again less. Again, in the pregnancy or during the lactation cases, because their lactating moments, milk formation will be there, and so she has to feed the baby also. There also again requirement is slightly higher. So in the normal infants, 0 to 6 month of age, 200 mg, 6 to 12 month of age, 260 mg. Boys, children's, if from age group of 1 to 18 years, 700 to 1300 mg. In the adults ones, 19 to 15 year of age, 1000 mg. Women, up 15 plus years, 1200 mg, because they are normally bone osteoporosis is slightly higher. Why? Because of estrogen level is going to reduce, and if estrogen level will reduce, bone demineralization occurs. So that's why C requires higher concentration. Whereas in case of males, this situation does not occur, so that's why they require slightly lower than the women. And during pregnancy, its requirement is slightly higher than the normal woman. Now, if we see the biochemical functions, this is the biochemical functions where how it requires, where it requires. So its requirement is in the bone and teeth. Uh, what it is going to do in the bone and teeth? Uh, if we will see in the details, it involves in muscle contractions, coagulation, working as a coagulation factors, integrity of cells membrane and permeability is going to be maintained by calcium. It works as secondary messengers for the hormonal activity. It works in enzyme activation as a cofactors, nerve impulse transmission, neurotransmitter releases, and their function it requires. Secretory process of many of the enzymes, many of the hormones are going to release because of the calcium, and action on the hertz, that is, it is going to prolong the systoles. So these are the overall functions. For that one, we are having mnemonics, how you can remember it. So we are having BCCI means have hertz, where B means it is bone and teeth. C means muscle contraction. Again, this C means it is working as a coagulation factor. I means integrity of membrane and permeability. M means messenger, a secondary messenger. E means enzyme activations. N means nerve impulse or neurotransmitter release or nerve impulse transmission. S means secretory process. This H means hormone release, and this H means it requires for hertz and prolong the systoles. So this is how you can remember the important function of the uh, calcium. Now, if we'll see one by one details, the role of calcium in the bone and teeth. So, calcium along with phosphate required for the formation of hydroxyapatite and physical strength of skeletal muscle. So, this hydroxyapatite is responsible for the strength of skeletal muscles, and this is going to form once we are having a sufficient amount of calcium along with phosphate. Bone is regarded as the mineralized connective tissue. Bone, which is are in the dynamic state, serves as the reservoir of calcium, because whenever body requires or serum will have less low concentration, that time calcium comes from the bone by demineralized process. So bone is working as a reservoir of calcium in our body. Osteoblasts are responsible for the bone formation, and osteoclast results in the demineralization process. So whenever depending on the calcium concentration, if we are having more higher amount of calcium, we require those calcium to be deposited into the bone. So that time we require osteoblast cell, because bone formation or mineralization needs to be occur. And whenever serum will have low level of calcium, that time we require demineralization process. So that time osteoclast cells will be more active. Second one is role of calcium in the muscle contraction. Calcium normally interact with troponin C to trigger muscle contraction. Uh, in bone means muscle fiber, we are having different types of protein, different type of components. Like we are having tropomyosins, we are having actin, myosin, troponin, different type of troponins. Troponin C is exclusively in the cardiac tissue only. So there troponin C interact with calcium, and for this along with means this contract combination of calcium with the troponin C requires for muscle contraction. Not only this one, calcium also activates the different enzymes which is responsible for muscle contraction and relaxation, like ATPase, which helps in the interaction between actin and myosin fibers. Here you can see in this figure, uh, uh, here troponin C is there, and which is going to combine with calcium, and it helps in the muscle contraction. Calcium ion concentration is low, and troponin covers the myosin binding sites on actin, and calcium binds to troponin, which shifts and moves tropomyosin, exposing myotin binding sign on the actin. So by this one, whenever we are having calcium sufficient, calcium or calcium low, no, when we don't have calcium, that time tropomyosin covers the myosin binding site, so no binding will be there, actin and myosin binding will not occurs. When we are having sufficient amount of calcium, this tropomyosins normally exposing the shifts, and it exposes the myosin binding site on the actin. So actin and myosin binding will be there, and muscle contraction will occur. So this is the how calcium involves in the muscle contraction. If you'll say how it is going to involve in the blood coagulations, uh, several reactions of the blood cascades. This is the detail about the blood cascades. So several reaction of the blood cascade normally requires the calcium, that is factor 4. We are having different two major type of coagulation pathway. One is intrinsic, second one is extrinsic. Where if you'll see the blood means where we require calcium. So like for the activation of the factor 9, if you'll see here, sorry, factor 11 to factor 11a, there we require calcium. Factor 8 is going to be activated to factor 8a, there also we require calcium. Then here also we require for combining with the factor 7, we require calcium. Then factor 10 to factor 10a activation, we require calcium. Factor 5 to 5a, we require calcium. Factor prothrombin to thrombin conversion, we require calcium. And fibrinogen to fibrin conversion, we require calcium. So calcium is not required only at one process, not only as an important factor, but it also involves in many different kind of activation. Some of the important activation is it involves in the thromboplastin activation. It requires for factor 8 to 8a conversion, factor 10 to 10a conversion, prothrombin to thrombin conversion, fibrinogen to fibrin conversion. So many different processes of blood coagulations requires calcium for their activation. So ultimately clotting will occur. That is the natural process of our blood. When we are having low level of calcium, clotting process or blood clotting time will increases, so it will require more time to for the clotting processes. Next we are having how calcium is going to involve in the nerve transmission. So normally this is a synapse. Synapse means it is a junction of the two different nerve fibers. When a action potential reaches to the presynaptic terminus, uh, so that time normally calcium channels is going to this, here we are having voltage gated calcium channel. This voltage gated calcium channel going to be open, and calcium inflow will be there. So calcium, as you are going to see here, calcium is coming into the presynaptic nerves. This is the presynaptic terms, and this is the postsynaptic terms. So calcium inflow will be there, and because of this, calcium normally release of neurotransmitter from the vesicles will be there. So here you are going to see these are the vesicles which contains the neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitter is going to be released outside into the cleft, synaptic cleft, the means which is the space between the two synapses, presynaptic and postsynaptic nerves. This neurotransmitter which is released into the synaptic cleft going to bind to the neurotransmitter channel, means a receptor onto the postsynaptic membrane. This is the postsynaptic membrane. So there we are having neurotransmitter receptors. So as soon as this neurotransmitter binds here, it is going to open and different kind of channels, sodium and potassium channels. So ultimately opening and closing of the channels causes changes in the postsynaptic membrane potential, and again action potential will initiate on this postsynaptic membrane. So the action potential which came here, it is going to be transmitted to the second nerves, from the presynaptic nerves to the postsynaptic nerves with the help of neurotransmitter. And for the release of this neurotransmitter, we require calcium. If this voltage gated calcium channel will not work here, or it will be defective, release of neurotransmitter will not occur, nerve conduction will be affected. So there we require calcium. Then if you see the calcium, how it works as a secondary messengers, different kind of, normally we are having two types of hormones in our body. one kind of hormones where directly they can reach into the cytoplasm, and second kind of hormones where they cannot transport it into the cytoplasm. They have to bind to the receptor onto the plasma membrane. So those hormones for which cannot be crossed, which cannot cross the plasma membrane, which has to bind wait to the plasma membrane, bind to the receptor onto the plasma membrane, they are called as primary messenger, as you are going to see here. So those signaling membrane or the molecules or the hormones are called as primary messenger. They binds to the receptor, and ultimately they are going to activate, increase the calcium inflow. Means they going to increase the calcium flow into the cytoplasm. Normally in our body, we are having two major sources of calcium. Either calcium will be in the outside extracellular matrix, as we have seen in the presynaptic or synapses also in the previous function, or we are having endoplasmic reticulum, we are having calcium channel, calcium concentration. On plasma membrane, normally we are having voltage gated calcium channel. When voltage differences will be there, this calcium channel gets open and calcium inflow will be there. But the calcium channel which is present on the endoplasmic reticulum, they are not voltage gated. They are not going to be opened by voltage. They are going to be opened with the some kind of factor, some kind of chemical molecules. It requires a specific key. So they are called as ligand gated calcium channel. So here it is IP3 which is going to bind to this calcium channel and opens it. From where we are getting this IP3 inositol 345 phosphatidyl inositol. So when G protein will be activated, it's going to activate phospholipase C. Phospholipase C works on phospholipid on from the plasma membrane, convert them into DAG and IP3. This IP3 itself is a secondary messenger, and this IP3 binds to this calcium channel, opens calcium channel, and calcium is coming out of the endoplasmic reticulum. And then this calcium will perform different kind of functions, like it can bind to the different kind of calcium binding protein like calmodulin and number of other uh, calcium binding proteins, and perform different types of functions. So this is how calcium works as a secondary messenger. So the message comes from this hormone, which primary messenger will be ultimately activated or converted done by this calcium. So calcium ions are even more widely used as a cyclic, more than the cyclic AMP as a secondary messenger. Increase the cytosolic calcium concentration causes many responses like muscle cell contraction, secretion of the substances, cell division. How this cytosolic concentration of calcium increases? We have two options, but he mostly it is going to be open increased by this IP3 gated calcium channel. So this is how it works as a secondary messenger. Then calcium, we have also seen that it is responsible for the membrane integrity and permeability. Calcium influences the membrane's structure and transport of water and several ions across it, and by which it is going to maintain it. Calcium also requires for main number of enzymes activation as a cofactor. So calcium is needed for the direct activation of enzymes such as lipase, pancreatic lipase, ATPase, or succinate dehydrogenase of the Krebs cycle. Calmodulin is one of the calcium binding proteins whose molecular weight is roughly 17,000. Is a calcium binding regulatory protein. So when calcium binds with this calmodulin into the cytoplasm, it activates number of other proteins, other enzymes like adenylate cyclase. They require calcium calmodulin complex. Calcium dependent protein kinase. They also requires calcium calmodulin. So some places calcium directly activates without binding to the calmodulins like ATPase or succinate dehydrogenase or pancreatic lipase. Some places, some of the enzymes is going to be activated when calcium comes along with calmodulin. So in both way, calcium activates number of enzymes in our body. Then calcium also works as a release of many hormones like ADH, insulin, number of other peptide hormones. So like this is the example how insulin is going to be released whenever we eat, we take the food. Some on our pancreatic beta cell, this is the example of pancreatic beta cells where we are having glucose transporter, that is called as GLUT2. These are non-insulin dependent glucose channels, so directly glucose from intestine, from blood circulation reaches to the pancreatic beta cells. This glucose is going to be metabolized and going to produce ATP. So as a result of glucose metabolism into the pancreatic beta cells, we are going to have ATP. This ATP going to bind to the ATP sensitive potassium channel here, and ultimately going to block it. when ATP will bind that one, this is going to be closed. So membrane is going to be depolarized because of this closure of this potassium channel. As membrane is going to be depolarized, and on plasma membrane, you know that we are having voltage gated calcium channel. So when membrane depolarized, voltage gated calcium channel is going to be sensitized and it will be opened. As a result, calcium inflow will be there. So as you are going to see, calcium is reaching to the cytoplasm. And when calcium will reach into the cytoplasm, because of the cytoskeleton combination actin myosin fiber activations, number of insulin vesicles or the enzyme wherever hormone, whatever hormones will be stored into the vesicles, secretory vesicles, they are going to be released into the extracellular matrix or the cytoplasm outside the cells. So this is how calcium involves in the hormone secretion, hormone releases. Fine. Then there are a number of factors which is going to involved in the calcium absorptions. So, like vitamin D, via calcitriols, vitamin D3, active form of calcitriols. You might have heard studied the vitamin D have different forms, active, non-active forms. So, calcitriol where 3 OH group will be there. This is the active form of vitamin D. So, this vitamin D normally induces the synthesis of calcium binding protein in our cells, uh, especially into the intestinal epithelial cells. So when we have having calcium binding proteins, so calcium absorption will be promoted. So vitamin D helps in the calcium absorption by synthesizing more calcium binding protein. Then we are having parathyroid hormones PTH, which also increases the calcium absorption through the increased synthesis of vitamin D3. More vitamin D3, more calcium binding proteins, and ultimately more absorption. There are certain conditions like low pH or acidity, lactose, amino acid like lysine, arginines normally going to favors the calcium absorption, so it increases calcium absorption. Some of the compounds like phytates, oxalates, which normally forms insoluble salts and affects calcium absorption, decreases calcium absorption because phytates and oxalates normally binds with calcium, chelates calcium, and does not allow them to absorb. So if your food contains, if you are going to take some kind of citrus fruit, some kind of fruits which contains oxalic acid or phytic acids, calcium absorption will be decreased in your body. High content of dietary phosphate result into the formation of insoluble calcium phosphate, and there normally uptake will be absorption will be affected. So the when where we are having dietary ratio of calcium phosphate is 1:2 or 2:1, that is the ideal for calcium absorption. Free fatty acid that also binds with calcium forms insoluble calcium soap, and this is particularly observed when fatty means fat absorption is going to be affected. As opposite to the acidic condition, alkaline conditions and high dietary fiber normally unfavorable for calcium absorption. They are going to decrease our absorption of calcium. So the absorption of calcium mainly occurs in the duodenum and it is an energy dependent process. So that is an active process, and these are the factors which is going to affect its absorption. Now, if we'll see the regulation of calcium, how it is going to be regulated in our body. So normally in our body we are going to maintain calcium in very narrow range. So our normal concentration of calcium in our body is 9 to 11 mg per dl, and three important component, yeah, three important hormone you can call it, which mainly involves in the regulation of calcium in our body. So they are calcitriol, that is vitamin D, parathyroid hormone PTH, and calcitonin. These are the major factor or major regulator of calcium in our body. So most of the blood calcium present in plasma. So if this is the how we have already seen it, that more than 99% of the calcium of our body is present into the bones. Less than 1% is present in extracellular matrix. Out of this 1%, from this 1%, more than 50% that is non-bond calcium, which is present in the ionized forms or free dializable forms. 10% normally associated with the different kind of components like phosphate, bicarbonate, sulfate, or citrate, and 40% that is blood calcium, which is associated with the proteins or mainly with the albumin. So this is how calcium is distributed in our body. Now we are going to see the regulation of calcium by those three factors. Okay, so if we'll say calcitriol, that is vitamin D, Normally, you know that vitamin D synthesis occurs in our skin through 7-hydroxycholecalciferol. So vitamin D3 will be formed, and this vitamin D3 from the skin, it is going to the liver for hydroxylation. There it is going to be hydroxylated at 25th position, and this 25 hydroxy vitamin reaching to the kidney, there again it is going to be hydroxylated at first position. Okay, so ultimately this calcitriol, this is the active form of vitamin D3, which is which formation occurs into the kidney. From there, once vitamin D3 is going to be formed, it is going to works at different places. Uh, this is how vitamin D3 forms. In this vitamin D3 formations, one of the important role is played by parathyroid hormones. That is, the chief cells of parathyroid glands is going to synthesize PTH. This PTH has three important, uh, you can call it substrate or the activator molecules. So this PTH works on our kidney, as you are going to see. It is working on our kidney, it is working on bone, and it is working on a small intestine. What it is do on kidney, what it is doing on bone, what it is doing on a small intestine, and how it is going to helps in the regulations, that we are going to see it. First, we will see how vitamin D3 is going to work on our body. So this physiologically active form of vitamin D, that is 125 dihydroxy cholecalciferol, DHCC. This is the call, as you can call it, physiologically active form or most active form of vitamin D3. The synthesis of calcitriol and its wide range of biochemical activity is normally in the bone formation and bone mineralizations only. This vitamin D3, active form of vitamin D3, induces the synthesis of a specific calcium binding protein, as we have seen, especially into the intestinal cells. And this protein increases the intestinal absorption of calcium as well as phosphate. So, blood calcium level is increased by calcitriol. Uh, Further, calcitriol also stimulates calcium uptake by osteoblasts of bones and promote calcification. All you can call it a mineralization, that is deposition of calcium and phosphate into the bone. So this vitamin works on bone and helps in the mineralizations. It also works on small intestine, vitamin D3, and increases absorption by increasing calcium binding proteins activation. Then, if we'll see this PTH, how this PTH works, parathyroid hormone is secreted by two pairs of parathyroid glands that are closely associated with thyroid glands. Parathyroid hormones is a single chain polypeptide which contains roughly 84 amino acids. It is originally synthesized by pre-pro-prothyroid hormones like insulin, you might have heard about pre-pro insulin. How it works? So this parathyroid hormones, when it is going to works on the bone, that is the major activator of the parathyroid hormone. So PTH causes the decalcification of demineralization of bones, means calcium will be released from the bone and it will reach to the serum. Okay, so it causes the demineralization of bones. That is a process carried out by osteoclast cells, and this is brought out by PTH stimulated increased activity of enzyme that is called pyrophosphatase and coagulation. These two enzymes is going to be activated by PTH. This enzyme results in the bone resorption. Demineralization ultimately leads to the release of calcium from the bone and increases in the blood calcium level. Similarly, this PTH also works on a small intestine and increases the uh, means it not directly works on the intestine, it works indirectly via the vitamin D3 vitamin D. It also works on the kidney. How it works in the kidney? It once it is going to increase the synthesis of vitamin D3. Second, it increases the absorption of calcium, or excretion is going to be decreased and absorption is going to be increased. So more calcium will be retained into the body, not excreted. And when more calcium will be retained into the body, obviously serum calcium level will increase. So ultimately serum calcium level rises, and it is having the opposite effect on the serum phosphate. So serum phosphate is going to be excreted. So here you can see it when we are having decreased blood calcium level. So then decreased blood calcium stimulates the PTH secretions. So more when we are having low calcium level into the blood, more PTH will be secreted. More PTH, this is working at the three levels. It works on bone, it works on kidney, and it works on indirectly on the intestine, as we are going to see here. This PTH onto the kidney increases the more secretion of vitamin D3, and otherwise it is also going to increase the reabsorption and of calcium and decreases the secretion of calcium. This vitamin D3 works on intestine, increases more vitamin D binding, calcium binding protein. So more calcium will be produced here, more protein will be promoted here, and that is going to be absorbed more calcium. When it is working on the bones, normally it is going to increase the osteoclast cells and promote calcium releases from the bone. Ultimately, it will reach to the blood circulation. So this is how these three hormones working for the two hormones, vitamin PTH and vitamin D working for calcium. The third hormone, that is called as calcitonin. This calcitonin is again it is a peptide hormone which roughly contains the 32 amino acid, and it is secreted by parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland. This activity of calcitonin on calcium metabolism is antagonistic to that of PTH. And what it is going to do? It promotes the calcification by increasing the activity of osteoclasts. So the major function of PTH on osteoclast cells, it increases the activity of osteoclast cells, whereas calcitonin, you can see here, this is working on inhibits the osteoclast cell, rather it is going to activate the osteoblast cells. So, and it calcitonin also working on the kidney by increases the calcium excretion. So the function of calcitonin is opposite to PTH, parathyroid. This is the overall functions of PTH, vitamin D, and calcitonin on our body. So in the bones, PTH increases the reabsorption process. Vitamin D also increases reabsorption and formation mineralizations, whereas calcitonin normally decreases the reabsorption process. Kidney, PTH increases the tubular calcium reabsorption. Tubular phosphate excretion will be increased. Means more phosphate will be released and more calcium will be reabsorbed. Vitamin D also have calcium on similar functions like PTH, where calcitonin has opposite function than the PTH and vitamin D. In GIT tract, PTH indirectly works through calcium vitamin D for the synthesis of more calcium binding proteins, and more calcium and phosphate will be reabsorbed. So overall effect of PTH on serum calcium level: PTH increases serum calcium, vitamin D also increases serum calcium, whereas calcitonin decreases serum calcium. Similarly, on phosphate, PTH decreases serum phosphate level, vitamin D3 increases, and calcitonin again decreases the serum phosphate level. So this is how these three hormones regulates the calcium level via vitamin D, or directly or indirectly. Now, if we'll see the excretion of calcium from our body, so calcium is excreted partly through the kidney and mostly through the intestine. The renal threshold for calcium is 10 mg per dl. So whenever we are having more than 10 mg per dl in our body, it is going to be excreted. Ingestion of excess protein causes the increased calcium excretion into the urine due to an increased activity of acidity of urine. Excretion of calcium into the feces is a continuous process, and this is an increase when we are having more vitamin D deficiency. Because if we are having vitamin D deficiency, no calcium binding protein will be produced, and no calcium binding protein will be there, no calcium absorption will be there, so feces will have more calcium. Hypercalcemia is also associated with the hyperparathyroidism. Elevation in the urinary excretion of calcium and phosphate, often resulting in the formation of urinary calculi. Whenever we are having more calcium and phosphate, they will deposit into the kidney and ultimately going to form urinary calculi. Hypocalcemia is mostly due to hypoparathyroidism, and it is a life threatening. When we are going to compare hypercalcemia and hypocalcemia, so hypocalcemia is more serious and it is life threatening. Now, if we'll see the diseasic state, in the case, one thing I have left it, uh, whenever we are having calcium level goes up and goes down, normally the calcium which is present in your bone, that is going to be affected. So bone mineralization will occur, bone demineralization occurs depending on the hormones and mediated by hormones and vitamin D. But the calcium which is present in your teeth is not going to be affected, because decalcification from the teeth does not occur in any condition in the adult. Now come to the disease states. Blood calcium is maintained within a very narrow range in our body. Uh, and for that one, we are having three important hormones: parathyroids, calcitonin, and vitamin D. Now, the first condition is hypercalcemia. Whenever calcium level rises more than 9 to means hypercalcemia means calcium level rises more than 11 mg per dl. So that is called as hypercalcemia, and this is mainly caused because of the hyperparathyroidism. It decreases in the serum phosphate due to the increased renal losses or increase in the alkaline phosphatase activity, also found in the hyperparathyroidism. The symptoms for this hypercalcemia is it includes lethargy, muscle weakness, loss of appetite, constipation, nausea, increased myocardial, and one of the important cause for this hypercalcemia is uh, multiple myeloma. That is one of the cause of this one. When we are going to cause another disease, that is called as hypocalcemia, when calcium level is less than 9 mg per dl, that is called as hypocalcemia, and that is more serious and it is a life threatening condition. It is characterized by the when serum calcium level falls less than 7 mg per dl, it is called as tetany. The symptoms for tetany includes neuromuscular irritability, spasm, and convulsions. Hypocalcemia is mostly due to hyperparathyroidism. This mainly happens after an accidental surgical removal of parathyroid glands also, and that is also one of the causes autoimmune disorders. One of the diseases is rickets. Rickets is a disorders of defective calcification of bone. This may be due to the low level of vitamin D in the body or due to a dietary deficiency of calcium or phosphate, or it can cause because of the both also. The concentration of serum calcium and phosphate may be low or normal. An increase in the activity of alkaline phosphatase is a characteristic feature of this rickets. Next one, we are having renal rickets. Renal rickets is associated with the damage to the renal tissue, causing impairment in the synthesis of calcitriol. We are unable to synthesize vitamin D, and it ultimately leads to the rickets. So the rickets, which is caused because of the renal deficiency or renal abnormality, where calcitriol is not going to be synthesized, there we are having renal rickets. Another disease we are having that is associated with this one is osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is normally going to be characterized by demineralization of the bone, resulting into the progressive loss of bone mass. In elderly peoples over the 60 year of age, both sexes are at very high risk of osteoporosis, and it is more predominantly occurs into the post menopausal women. Osteoporosis results in the frequent bone fractures, which are the major cause of disability among the elderly. Uh, if the etiology of the osteoporosis is largely unknown, but it is believed that the several causative factors are contributing to it. The ability to produce calcitriol from the vitamin D is decreased with along with age. As aging is going on, vitamin D synthesis decreases, and when vitamin D synthesis will decreases, normally bone demineralizations will occurs. Next one, and the last disease we are having, that is osteopetrosis, or it is also called as marble bone disease. Osteopetrosis is characterized by increased bone density, and this is primarily due to the inability of reabsorb bone. This disorder is mostly observed in the associated with the renal tubular acidosis, which is caused because of the due to an defects in the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, and it is cerebral calcification. So this is overall. Hope you have understand everything about the calcium, their regulation, their metabolic processes, and their important functions. Uh, so this is all about calcium. When we are going to, I have already told you, calcium means decreased level of calcium or low level of calcium or hypocalcemia is more serious than the hypercalcemia. For this one, there are some of these important symptoms of hypocalcemia, that is brittle and weak bones will be there, osteoporosis will occur, weakness and fatigueness will be there, bone fracture can cause, problem with the proper blood clotting will occurs, heart, because it is also involved in the heart processes, so there also it is going to occurs. So when we are talking about hypocalcemia, the symptoms you can remember in with the uh, mnemonics that is called as cats, CATS. What is the symptoms of this one? It is called convulsion. So when low level of calcium will be there, it will call convulsions. It is called arrhythmia. It is going to cause tetany, and it is going to cause spal. So cats you can remember as the symptoms for the low level of calcium or hypocalcemia, and which is caused because of many reasons. One of the important reason is hypoparathyroidism. So this is all about the calcium minerals, their function and everything. Hope you have understand it. If you have any query, anything, any question, you can write in the comment box. If you have not subscribed my channel, you can subscribe my channel. You can press the bell button so that you can get all the notification on time. You can also follow me or my channels on different social platforms. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.